and welcome everyone to this special follow-up video to ProtectX5. Now, if you remember, ProtectX5 took place back in September, and it was an InsurTech special, and we looked at how InsurTech will revolutionise or at least evolve the protection market going forward. And in this video, I'm delighted to be talking to Mark Budd from Zurich. So Mark, welcome along. How are you doing?
Great, thank you, Roger. It's a pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. Mark, just tell me a little bit about yourself. What do you do at Zurich, and what's been occupying you recently?
So I head up a team called the Innovation Foundry at Zurich, and that function exists to take ideas from anywhere in our business. We take it through an innovation process, and we test it for value at certain stages. The good ideas we keep, we pilot, and hopefully we scale. And the ones that aren't going to work out, we tend to learn from those fast and get rid of them early and move on to the next thing. That's our role, really, is just to develop new ideas within the organisation. We do work quite closely with InsurTech sometimes. And when we see an InsurTech we're interested in, sometimes the process we go through is we look at the solution they provide and we widen that back to what problem is that solving for our organisation. Then we move back forward through our process.
Thinking about technology, what do you think are the main trends that we'll see in technology which might have an impact on the protection market in the future?
In the role I'm in, we often talk about the horizons of innovation, and I think that's something worth looking at for this question. In the immediate horizon, I see the need for ongoing adoption of digital in a fairly incremental way. I see that as hygiene, to be totally honest. And Louise and Vishala and Ralph all alluded to this in their slots. Digital documentation, online, self-serve, omni-channel experiences are all kind of things that we need to keep doing. And I think they're digital hygiene. I think if you look past that and beyond that and into the next horizon, we can start to look at things that are perhaps considered more transformational. Matt Coulson in one of the slots mentioned eGPRs, and broader adoption of sharing digital medical records will definitely be a game changer. In the meantime, we're already sort of doing things around digital scanning of paper medical records, which will certainly speed things up. And automation and AI and underwriting will get more traction over time, as there are clear benefits for the customer, advisors and the insurer. I would say you can't really talk about tech advancements without talking about InsurTech and startups. And you did talk about that at the very beginning. And 99 times out of 100, I see startups as a partnership opportunity. They don't tend to take on the whole proposition. They typically address certain steps in the value chain, whether that be in marketing or in the apply process or the underwriting process. And these can be really good opportunities to accelerate your digital maturity in that space. And finally, I think a point I wanted to make, it's not really one about technology per se, but it's about the proposition and how over time, I think we will see prevention or adjacent services forming part of a broader proposition, whether that be virtual GPs or wellbeing services that offer a more holistic proposition. These aren't really tech; they're propositions that help broaden our offering, which are enabled by tech.
Sometimes people accuse the industry of effectively the only thing we've really done with digital technology is electrified the application process. Do you think that that's a fair criticism? I think we've done a lot more, but it'd be interesting to get your take on it.
I think that it could appear that way, but I know that's not true. I mean, digitizing these things is not as simple as just digitizing the process. I think we've simplified the way we do things. We've used technology to improve the communications we do with customers. There are lots and lots of different things that we've done. It's not as simple as just digitizing the application process. In the claims space, we're doing lots more which is sort of enabled by technology.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that the claims side of things often gets left till last, doesn't it? But let's flip to the other end of the application process. What do you think the tension is between the underwriting process that we've lived with for decades and future technological developments?
It's an interesting one because the AI guys and the tech guys will say that the AI can underwrite better than the human being. The underwriters will say it's too complex and they don't trust the AI. And I think the answer is probably in the middle somewhere. Over time, I'm sure it's inevitable. But with all these things, the trick's going to be getting the balance right. And I still think that might take some time.
Yeah. And talking about time, I guess that having worked in big corporate insurance myself, I was used to 18-month product development cycles and sometimes took even longer. And one thing that the pandemic has shown is that if we absolutely have to, we can do things really quickly. And guess what I'm asking is, will we be able to continue with that speed going forward once the pandemic fades away? But also, we almost have to, don't we? Because consumers' expectations these days are, they want immediacy. People want answers to questions almost as soon as they've asked them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I completely agree that COVID's helped speed some of these things up, but it's probably really only highlighted a trend that was already there. I think immediacy, yes. And I think what also comes with that is frictionless experiences. So you're right, customers' expectations are always changing. Increasingly, customers want to manage their finances online. In some research we did, 8 out of 10 customers wanted to be able to put the medical information on for themselves, which is convenient for the customer and also save time for the advisor. Digitization, you talked about it just now, digitization of the application and claims process is already happening, which helps speed things up. And then there are things like chat services, whether that be manned by a human being or even potentially a chatbot to help answer some of the more frequently asked questions, are all things that I think will help speed things up. That said, a lot of your speakers talked about more personalized products and choice, and I think that's bang on. And not everybody wants a fully digital experience, especially when they're buying products that are unfamiliar or the consequences of making a bad choice are much more important. So yes, I think we need to embrace digital. Yes, I think it'll make things go faster, but we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Data's a really interesting one as well, Mark. I guess we've got access to more data now than we've ever had before. And I do sometimes wonder, are we actually using that data to its fullest potential? Or even flipping it the other way, do we now have access to so much that we actually don't really know what to do with it all?
In answer to the question about are we using it to its full potential, I would probably say no. But I think that's true, not just insurance, but in many, many, many industries. And you're right, the problem is with data that it wasn't so long ago when we were wishing we had more data. Now we've got more data than we know what to do with. And I do think that is increasingly a problem, actually. Louise said in one of her in her slot that we need to be really clear on the value exchange if we want customers to share their data, and that's normally for improved speed or an effortless experience, or maybe even a better deal. But with data and in a very heavily regulated environment, we do need to be really mindful of what data we collect, where it's stored, what we do with it. It's not always easy to do what we might like to do with data, and we need to consider that carefully. There is a cultural shift moving towards data science, which I think we are bound to see more data-led intelligence and decision-making, but again, I think it'll be quite some time before we really see that at scale.
I guess there is a trust issue around data, isn't there? And people have read quite a lot of stories about data leakage and abuse of data by other fairly sizably recognisable brands. What do you think we can do to encourage more trust with the public around things like data and underwriting and technology?
I think the regulator helps, because the regulator helps us behave responsibly. And trust, I still think it's back to Louise's point around the value exchange. If they trust that we are using their data, let's assume they accept that it's secure. The trust then turns into what's the value exchange. So if you're going to give me your data, what am I going to do with it? What's the benefit in that? So the trust element, I think, will probably always be there to some extent. So some people are much more willing to share data than others, and I hope it's never Zurich, but inevitably you do get these things where an employee might behave irresponsibly, or there is some sort of cyber breach. And I think those things are inevitable across numerous industries. Hopefully there'll always be very small instances, but the trust will come from improved security. But I still think it's really around that value exchange. So I trust you with my data, but what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, and I've also thought that in the marketing communications that we do as an industry, there will have to be a greater focus in future on that trust element. It won't just be about us pushing the product messages and pushing the service messages. I think that there will become a stage where we'll have to push trust messages as well. And talking about marketing and communications, I guess as an industry, we haven't been the best at promoting the protection message. It is a grudge purchase for a lot of people. It's quite an emotional subject for a lot of people. Have we got any advantages now with technology developing the way that it is that we can start to improve communications, and how would we go about that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. So when we talked earlier on, I sort of referenced services that might sit adjacent to the proposition. I think when it's not just the insurance you're buying a broader proposition. The communication, the value that somebody will get out of the product they bought is probably more evident, at which point it's easier to talk about. I think social channels are a good opportunity for insurers and advisors to get to customers in a way they probably couldn't have done previously. We probably would have had to rely on billboards or expensive TV advertising campaigns. So I think the channels are opening up to allow people to communicate better. I think the industry generally isn't very good at celebrating success. So there might be something culturally there that we really need to look at to think about why we don't do that. I do think that the broader we make the proposition, where there are more than one element of value, because insurance is one of those weird things that you buy that you hope you never use. So if we can embellish that core proposition with some services that sit around that, the likelihood is that the value and the conversation around the value is likely to be more prominent.
So we've got a combination of data, we've got improved technology which can allow us to deliver better products and better service. And you mentioned the word personalisation earlier, and that's very interesting as well. Are we moving to a world now where insurance will become increasingly personalised, where we actually maybe create an even more intimate relationship with the customer? Is that something that is going to be desirable, or is that something that the consumer will want, or is that taking it a little bit too far?
No, I think it's a really interesting one. Earlier on, when you said immediacy, I almost misheard that as intimacy. So I think it's a really good point, and you're right about insurance as being a grudge purchase. Earlier on, I talked about startups and that 99 out of 100 don't tend to take on the full proposition, but there are some that do start to take on the broader proposition. So Lemonade is a really good example in the GI space. They can give quotes in 2 minutes. They pay claims in 3 seconds. But the intimacy piece of that is that they've got some really strong social causes which the customer can feel that they identify with. And they're not just buying insurance, they're doing something that's got a good cause. There's also an organisation called Bought by Many in the GI space, which is pet insurance. And they're cleverly just changing some of the narrative. They don't call them pet owners anymore. They're starting to call them pet parents. And you start to get this. It's not just the insurance. People start to feel they're more connected with the product. And then there's a really interesting one in the life space that I don't know if you've seen it or not. They're called Dead Happy.
Yes.
And their marketing is not corporate marketing. It's quite out there. But they're able to grant people death wishes for friends and family in the event of somebody passing away, not just a financial check at the end of it. And I just find it interesting how some of these financial products are sort of changing the way they talk about themselves to make them a little bit more engaging.
Yeah, and I think we'll see a lot more of that as technology develops. One of the really interesting talks at ProtectX5 was Andy Walton, and obviously he did his now famous sketch where he put a blindfold over his eyes to demonstrate perhaps that we're entering a world now where telephone conversations are on the way out, or indeed dead, as he claimed. Do you think that the telephone is redundant now in protection servicing?
Oh yeah, I really enjoyed Andy's slot. I thought it was good fun. I quite enjoyed the provocation. And the reality is, we've all had to get used to Zoom and Teams and video calls, and it was a change that happened overnight. And it's a really interesting example of what happens when the need fundamentally changes. And without COVID, I think the adoption of video calling at scale probably could have taken 10 years. But now it's here, you do have to think about why would you go back when there are so many obvious benefits. I mean, the video lets you see people, you can more easily form rapport with people, and then they're sharing content. So it's much easier for the conversation is richer because we're seeing people, we're able to share content more easily, we can point to things, we can even collaborate with things online. So the benefits of video calling are really, really strong. To say the telephone is dead, I don't know, because I still think there'll be scenarios where I won't be able to take a video call. I still use my phone on a daily basis, and not every call I make is a video call. But in the context of business, there are lots and lots of positives. So I would, if you only had video calls to start with and someone came up with just voice, I'm not sure it would take off. So it's quite an interesting sort of transition we've made, I think.
Yes, it may be the fact that the phone call is the first element of contact, and then after that it moves to video, because you're right, there are sometimes when you just don't want to be seen, don't you, like first thing in the morning or whatever it might be. Mark, it's been absolutely fascinating to discuss technology and protection with you today. And looking to the future again, what's your one wish for the future of the protection market from a technology point of view?
I think the wish really is that we don't see technology as a bad thing, and we don't see as a technology as taking away the things that we love. Technology can really help improve the way we do things. And I think just the wish really is that we continue to embrace technology and look for the good in it and not try and find the bad. Absolutely agree with that, Mark. So thanks once again for coming along and sharing your views on technology. Thank you everybody for watching this special edition of ProtectX, and we will see you for ProtectX6 in March 2022. Thanks, Roger. I really enjoyed that. Hopefully we can speak again soon.